Hi, thank you so much for hanging with us because we've had a few technical difficulties. I'm going to introduce our guest shortly, but again, thank you so much for staying with us. Staying safe online and protecting your privacy and identity can be challenging these days. While social media is valuable as a valuable tool to stay connected, it's also one of the main ways people put their online security at risk. So, how do you protect yourself, your many passwords, and your data against cyber threats, phishing attacks, malware, and identity threat? Tonight, we're going to talk about everything online, from cybersecurity awareness to how to avoid online swindlers, and why everyone is so worried. Well, maybe not everyone, but why a lot of us are worried about ChatGPT and all the news that's surrounding TikTok. To help us do that, we're joined by cyber and tech expert Ritesh Kotak. Hi, Ritesh. Thank you so much for your patience. You were actually helping me get online behind the scenes before we even met. So thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Some people might think I'm tech savvy. I do all the two-factor authentication. I'm careful online. Um, this topic doesn't apply to me. But why should everybody care about this digital privacy?
I think everyone should care. And unfortunately, this is one of those things that it's very reactive in a sense that you're like, is this something that I really need to invest time in? Do I really got to change passwords every few months? I got all these other things to remember and care about. But then when you do actually end up getting victimized, you realize once the toothpaste is out of the tube, it's really hard to put back in. And I've dealt with um, so many people, and these are just heartbreaking stories of individuals that have had their data compromised, that have had their devices compromised, their social media accounts compromised. Just individuals to small businesses to even larger corporations, and it is extremely frustrating, and it takes a toll on individuals, and you don't realize it until, unfortunately, you've been victimized by it. That's why I try to advocate for, let's be proactive, not reactive, because it's such a difficult thing to deal with if you do get victimized by a hacker or a fraudster.
And for everybody watching, if you have a question for Ritesh, please send it to us. And I didn't get a chance to communicate with my producer, but Carla, send it on my WhatsApp because of all the tech problems behind the scenes. Can you help us understand? Because I think sometimes we think of data and security and privacy, and it all becomes a bit confusing. So, what's the difference between data security and data privacy?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So we'll start with data privacy and then we'll go to data security. So data privacy is your data when and again, you ask 10 different people, you get 10 different definitions, but here's my definition. When an organization has your data, how did they obtain it and what are they doing with it? So for example, this is data privacy. Did they get the appropriate consent? Did they get your permission before they gave it to a third party? All the way from protecting an individual's rights when it comes to, so for example, you request, okay, organization, what data do you have on me? I want it deleted. That all falls within data privacy. Data security, on the other hand, is protecting the systems. It is protecting where that data is actually housed. So who has uh, access to that data? For example, are you using multi-factor authentication? What are you doing to protect that data from hackers, from it leaving the organization? The technical term is essentially the exfiltration of this type of data. So that falls under security. So privacy is what an organization does with the data, how they protect it, and the security component is all that cybersecurity stuff on making sure that data stays safe and doesn't get into the hands of what we call bad actors.
You mentioned that you've had situations where people's lives have been compromised when their information has been hacked. Because I think sometimes when we hear data and security and privacy, we can't really connect the dots. So, what kind of data are we talking about?
So I've seen situation where organ again, you can do everything, but organizations have been hacked. And once your data is out there, I've dealt with situations where it was people's personal addresses, their full legal name, their date of birth, phone numbers, so they start getting harassing calls from individuals, mainly being fraudsters. I've also seen situations where, and this one was these ones actually stick to me, stuck with me, and that was small businesses that have built their entire lives on social media. And what ended up happening was their accounts got hacked, and it wasn't their social media account that got hacked first. It was another site that got breached, where their username, which was their email address, and their password was compromised. Well, these individuals recycled passwords, and they used their email address to log into their sites, and they didn't have two-factor authentication. That's when you get that message that says, add in a code or authenticate on one of these third-party apps. And as a result, they lost access to their social media accounts. Now, they've spent days, trying to figure out, okay, how do I get my account back, dealing with the platforms, calling different organizations, and they just weren't able to get that account recovered. They had to go through the process like everyone else. And I remember small business owners, literally, and this one in particular, I'm not going to mention them, calling me and literally in tears and saying, I've spent years trying to build my online profile, and I feel like I got to start again. Like, I have sales that depend on this. My livelihood depends on this. And they just, again, they realize, the importance of data security when they've been victimized. And as I said, putting that toothpaste back in the tube was very, very difficult. There was a positive outcome here.
Mhm.
We were able to help them to get their account back, but it was a painstaking process.
I feel sick just listening to you say it, because just imagining being in that situation where if you're online, it takes people a long time to build their customers. And like you mentioned, if your business is on social media and it gets hacked and you don't have access to it, it could really it could destroy someone's life. But we're always being asked for our emails, right? Like you go to, I won't name the store, but I go to a store that I buy clothes for myself and my kids, because it's all in one store. But they always ask for, hey, can we have your email? You can get points. But you actually advise against that, because just your email alone can do some serious damage.
Yeah, and why do they want your email address? Or I've even had a situation, well, multiple situations where I've gone to buy items and they said, "Well, what's your postal code?" Well, on earth do you want my postal code? The reason for that is clearly it's marketing, analytics. They want to know where their customers are. They try to incentivize us by saying you're going to get points. Now, look, I'm not saying points are a bad thing. They are. They do help. There are benefits that come with it.
Mhm.
So I always advise people that just be cautious of what information you're giving to organizations. It is completely free to create an email address. Okay, it's free. It doesn't cost us anything. So what I do, and this is my own personal way of doing things, is I just create different email addresses for different things. And as a result, it's okay, great. If this, for whatever reason, if my email address gets compromised, well, guess what? That it's bad, and we're gonna have to deal with it. But on the flip side is, that's not the email address I use for my personal life. It's not the email address I use for my professional life. It's not my email address I use for banking purposes. So I add
It's your
in that
email
extra
address
layer.
that you use to get 10% off at the store.
Yeah, or 15 if they're being generous.
Do we know what organizations do with our data, how they keep it safe? Do they keep it safe?
So organizations are required to have any private sector organization, a individual that's kind of like a privacy manager. Organizations should have privacy policies that you can ask about. But is there any third party that's coming in to audit them? No. And is it something that's a checkbox exercise saying, yeah, we have a privacy manager who's also wearing all these other hats in the organization? And here's our privacy policy, which is probably a template that they got offline, right? So do we really know? The question, again, there's organizations that do it right, but there's organizations that look at it as a checkbox exercise. And as a consumer, if you're
Mhm.
giving up your data, I do believe you have a right to ask, and an organization should give you answers that make you feel okay. I feel safe giving you my information because I know that you have the appropriate safeguards in place, that you have the right processes in place. If there's an issue, you will appropriately deal with it instead of, yeah, okay, thank you. Here's the email address, 10%. We'll do whatever we want with your data.
We spoke to a former employee of Indigo, and even though she wasn't working there, her information was caught up in that recent when the data was compromised from Indigo and it hit the news. And it made me think of all the places that I've worked at. I've actually never thought about what happens to my data once I leave there. Why do employers still have someone's data when they no longer work there?
Yeah, so there's customer data and then there's employee data, and it's important to understand these are two very different buckets. So when it comes to employee data, employers do have it because there's a legal mandate in some cases to have that information. I don't know if it's 6 years or 7 years. For tax related purposes, there might be other legislation depending on where that company is headquartered. It gets more complex
Mhm.
when you have a parent company in a particular jurisdiction. Is it provincially regulated, federally regulated? There are all these nuances, but usually a employer will keep employee data for a prescribed amount of time because they legally have to do so.
Is it kind of like when we do our taxes, we're obligated to keep our information for like 7 years?
That's exactly it.
Okay. We do have a question. It's going to be on screen, although I can't really read that.
Okay.
Guys, my eyes are very bad. Can you put it in the Teams chat?
Okay,
I can pull it up there.
but Nam, I can read it.
You can read it?
I can read
Awesome.
it. Let me. It's the
Teamwork
question.
here.
There we go. Boom. We got a high five there. Well, the question comes in from Edward. It's do you feel having something like GDPR, which is the privacy regulations and mainly that have been adopted in Europe, would be beneficial in Canada?
Is that kind of
So
like the right to be forgotten, where you can ask for you to disappear offline?
yeah, so that's one element of GDPR, the right to be forgotten, which is an interesting right, and we can talk about that. I got so much to say about the right to be forgotten,
Hmm.
and if you really are forgotten, if there even is a such thing as delete on the internet, I think that's that's maybe a whole other conversation. But Edward, the thing is that Canada is in the process of updating their privacy laws. Bill C-27 in particular is in its second reading in the House of Commons. And what it does is it currently the private sector privacy regulations is PIPEDA. Well, that's going to change to, and I had to write this down, the CPPA, the Consumer Privacy Protection Act. It's going to add in requirements around safeguarding of data. I don't want to use the word the right to be forgotten, but your ability to actually tell an organization, hey, what data do you have on me? And you don't need that data. Can you discard it? There are
Hmm.
some exceptions to that rule as well, and a plain language requirement. That's that whole I agree being in legalese. Like, what on earth are you actually consenting to? You got to know what you're hitting I agree to. So that kind of plays into it as well. And there's two other sections to it.
Hmm.
The other one is it's going to create a privacy tribunal, which will be very interesting. And the third element is AI and data regulations as well. And that's a big question mark right now, but it's coming, and we are going to try to meet this global standard, which is been created in Europe, which is GDPR.
Okay, so Edward, thank you so much for your question. You actually brought us to where we were going to eventually get to with you, Ritesh. That bill is Bill C-27, and should I read the entire name? It's officially
Uh,
described
oh
as
God,
an
yeah.
well, it's officially described as an act to enact the Consumer Privacy Protection Act, the Personal Information and Data Protection Tribunal Act, and the Artificial Intelligence and Data Act, and to make consequential and related amendments to other acts. If you're on Twitter and you hear about this bill, it's either people, it's like two camps. Some people are really hyped about this bill, and other people are saying, no way. So, can you help us understand the benefits of this bill and maybe where it falls short?
Sure. So I think a lot of even the people that are saying we got to do more, or in some cases we got to do less, everyone will agree. I'm hoping everyone will agree. That's a pretty strong statement.
Mhm.
That at least the update to PIPEDA is welcomed. That's the element of safeguarding. That's the element of the plain language. element as well. So you got to know what on earth you're hitting I agree to. These contracts in legalese are very hard. Like even me, like I've gone to law school. I am a lawyer in Ontario as well. But the thing is yeah, I'll read these contracts and I'll read these terms, and even I'm like, what on earth are they trying to say? What does this mean?
I'm so glad you feel like that, because I know a lot of people watching, and myself included, I have said I accept or I
Mhm.
agree, and I have no idea what it is that I'm agreeing to or what I'm accepting. Apple gives you the option to ask apps not to track you, but what does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean, right? And I think the idea here is if you're going to hit I agree, if you're going to hit accept, you got to know what on earth you're actually accepting, what you're accepting, what your rights are, what you can and can't do. There is a bit of a power imbalance as well when you kind of think about it. You might say, "Oh, I agree to A, B, and C, but not D." Well, that means you can't use that function. You can't use that app anymore because it's either take it or leave it with these terms and conditions. It's not like I'm going to call up a very popular social media platform and say, yeah, I've read through your terms and
Do
conditions.
they
These
even
are
have a number? It's like none of them have
oh,
numbers.
no, yeah, they got no numbers. That's a whole other story. But how do you address that? So that's going to definitely be a challenge with any type of regulation. There's another big challenge, Nam, and that is the fact that a lot of these companies aren't actually headquartered in Canada. They're in other parts of the world. So how are we going to enforce some of these rules? Yes, a lot of the big companies that a lot of us are very familiar with, they do have a physical presence in Canada,
Mhm.
but their headquarters is somewhere else, their finance department somewhere else, their servers are located around the world, and it adds an element of complexity. And then there's obviously organizations and companies that have zero Canadian presence, and we download their apps and use it all day, every day. So the enforcement element is kind of going to be a tricky one on this. And then there's
Mhm.
other components as well. The tribunal, there's questions around just the makeup of the tribunal. If the office of the privacy commissioner, let's say, lays a fine, and kind of what other avenues you have for appeals. Like these are all kind of things that people are going back and forth on. However, I think the consensus seems to be that we need something, but people are obviously are going to agree and disagree on the specifics of the bill. But again, it's in its second reading. There's still
Mhm.
going to be committees. There's going to be back and forth. There might be amendments. Only time will tell, and your guess is as good as mine.
Well, thank you for breaking that down for us, because you kind of made it more. I wish that they would focus a bit more on this is about maybe giving some of the power back to us, because again, we kind of just like, oh, social media is free, emails are free, but they're not, are they? We're the consumers, we're the product, right?
Well, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product, right? That's the saying, right? And what does that actually mean? Well, it's your data, right? Data is the currency, and what these organizations are going to do is they're going to take your data, and they're going to start profiling you for advertising purposes, because that's how they're going to make their money. That's um, that's how they function. And if we just think about the type of data that they have, right? And
Mhm.
a lot of people are like, well, what type of data do they actually have on me? Well, they got device level data. So what type of device you're actually using. They have data with respect to your subscriber information. So when you actually sign up, what do you give them? Probably your name, your date of birth. You might give them some additional information as well, your email address, a password, which should
Pictures.
actually pictures, yeah. And then there's the content component, right? Like how you actually interacting on the app. Some of these apps go as far as taking, logging keystrokes. What Wi-Fi network are you actually connected with? All the way to what your likes and your dislikes are, who your friends are,
Mhm.
what are their likes? Why? So they can hyper target advertising. That's what it all comes down to, dollars and cents. But that's the type of data that is being collected on individuals.
We've got lots of questions to get to. This one is from Veronica. Veronica wants to know, how much can someone learn about you just with your email address?
That's a good question. Well, I guess if your email address is like, Ritesh Tech cyber fighter, right? I guess they can. But in all seriousness, there is a lot of information that you can potentially glean from an email address. So, for example, there are websites out there that will do what are called dark web searches. So, what are these dark web searches? Well, as I said, sometimes there's organizations that get hacked, they get breached. All that information goes into a database on this thing called the dark web. It gets sold. Why? Because your credentials, your information, that's money. That's money to fraudsters, to hackers. They want to see if there was actually a really big takedown that happened last week. It was the Genesis Marketplace, and some people may have heard of it. It was a joint investigation and takedown by 20 plus police services or countries around the world. I forgot the exact number. I think it was like 200 search warrants. It was really interesting because what the Genesis Marketplace was, and this was something when I got exposed to, I was like, why is this even available on online? Is you literally could go to this website, you put in a code, you put in your credentials, you got to put in an invite code because you got to be invited into this network, and you could literally go in and with Bitcoins you can purchase credentials. Like you could literally purchase hack credentials. You could also purchase bots, and what these bots would do is take those credentials and try to hack into people's Netflix accounts, to their social media accounts, to other accounts as well, and all this. And it will literally deploy the bot for you. And I don't want to get too complex, but in other words, is you can literally pay for people's credentials because there's money and value in it.
Okay, you're making me very nervous, and we've got about 10 minutes left, and I've got so many questions
Sure.
left to ask you. Something that's happening a lot on social media, and I'm guilty of it. I've shared a lot of information online. I think we have a question on there. Can you see it, Ritesh? Because I cannot see that.
I can, yeah, and it
Do
has
you
to do
want
with
to read that question?
Sure, it's by Ariana, and thank you, Ariana. It's what kind of data does TikTok mine, and what does it do differently with the data that makes it more dangerous than other apps? Re TikTok being banned by governments worldwide. Um, so Ariana, great question. I think this is front and center in a lot of people's minds right now. So TikTok, I look at it in three kind of areas, and we talked about this earlier, so I'm not going to repeat myself. But at the device level, what type of device you're using. At the subscriber level, your personal information. At the content level, what you like, what you dislike. And the issue with that's been raised by TikTok, and by the way, the ban is on government devices. It's not a ban on the app. So it's just important to clarify that. The issue here is that TikTok's parent company is ByteDance, which is in Beijing, and Beijing has particular data laws that make that gives it a heightened elevation of risk and concern to governments, and that is with billions of people using it, millions of Canadians. Is it possible for the Beijing government to say, "Hey, hey, TikTok, turn over this data to comply with Chinese data laws"? And that is the concern, and hence the heightened risk, which is what makes TikTok different than the other apps.
It leads me to my next question that I was asking. A lot of people are using TikTok to make a living. A lot of parents are sharing a lot of videos of their children on TikTok and other social media apps like Instagram. Why should parents be careful about posting too much about their children?
Yeah, and there's a term for that. It's called sharings, right? When you share too much about about your children. Because here's the thing: is that you start putting up images of your child. There's no such thing as delete on the internet. I'm a true believer in that. You don't know if it's been screenshot, where it's been saved, and these pictures will follow them for the rest of their life. And now, when they're 18, they might want to get into work, or privacy is definitely going to have a different meaning 20 years from now. And the images are out there, and you won't be able to get them off. So you've essentially taken away their choice there. There's other safety and security concerns as well. If clearly there's bad people in this world, and if they know your child's name, what they look like, what school they go to, that could definitely be a security concern as well. So look, but you might be proud, post images. There is a lot of good that can come from these apps as well. But just be security conscious of when you're doing it. Don't put the school, don't put the name, don't tag the location, don't put the face. And you can have fun with these apps and do it in a safe way.
And don't do their birthday on their birthday.
Oh yeah.
But because people are watching, and you sometimes forget. And again, I'm so guilty of doing this. You forget that you don't really know 1,000 people who are your close friends, right? And people are watching. So talk to us a little bit about personal privacy and what are swindlers?
So there's definitely different definitions, but at the end of the day, it's individuals that the way I look at it is they try to defraud um, members of the public, coast to coast to coast, and we've seen everything from grandparent scam to romance scams, where individuals will pretend to be someone, use social media to connect. There was recently a heartbreaking case out of our beautiful East Coast where fraudsters actually used apps to make it sound like they're the grandchild of a particular of obviously grandparents, and
Mhm.
said, I'm in jail, nana nona, please send me X amount of money, so I can get bail and get out of jail. So they add a sense of urgency. The voice was pretty similar. They had information clearly probably gleaned from social media, and they said, please don't hang up, you got to send me this information now. I know my grandparents would have sent information if they weren't, if you added that sense of urgency and they were scared.
Mhm.
And it was just heartbreaking, like tens of thousands of dollars in some cases.
But how do you protect yourself? Because I saw a new scam where the person received a phone call from their sister, and this person was like, I have your sister, and someone's crying in the background. Or if someone's watching you on social
Mhm.
media and kind of gets to know you a little bit with the information that you share, presents themselves in a way that you connect with, but meanwhile they're just setting you up to like how do you protect yourself from something like that?
All right, I'm going to give two pieces of advice. The first one is slow things down. That's there might be a sense of urgency. Just slow things down. Verify the information. They're going to say we need it now. We need it now. No, just slow it down. Just be like, okay, I start asking questions. One great piece of advice is have a saying with your loved ones that they must
Mhm.
use so you can verify it is them. So again, slow things down. And a lot of these high tech crime, low tech solutions, just be like, okay, let me get back to you, hang up, and call that person. Call your grandson, call whomever. If they say they're in a police station, get the information of the police station, go online, verify it, and then call. Like go to that extent, because if you slow things down, if you verify, if you hit that pause button, and you follow these really low tech solutions, it will hopefully prevent victimization.
We only have a few minutes left, but we've been hearing a lot about OpenAI's ChatGPT. It seems to be everywhere all of a sudden, and some people are praising it, others are worried about it. Should we worry or should we embrace it?
Wow. I guess there's components of it that we do need to be worried about. I think about the ethical components, the human right related components as well. But it's here. It's being incorporated into all elements of life. There is a lot of benefit that can come from it. Microsoft, for example, has made a huge investment in open AI. So imagine you go into the co-pilot, as they're calling it, and you type in something like "write me an email to Nam about the show in a professional tone." Boom, and it writes an email. Well, you could say now create a PowerPoint about and write me a business case. So there's a lot of access to resources that traditionally probably would have been expensive, not obtainable. Well, it's kind of solved. It kind of helps bridge that gap. But on the flip side, there's the good, the bad, and the evil. The way it could be leveraged and weaponized against organizations and individuals. I saw this demo where it was scan this particular website for vulnerabilities and now write code to exploit it, right? And clearly now you don't need any coding experience, and now we have a hack for a particular website. Should that be allowed? So I think
Mhm.
this is where a lot of countries are struggling to deal with these types of situations. It's
Mhm.
clearly here, but we do need some sort of regulation, some sort of guiding principle on how we're going to leverage this technology and other technologies that we haven't even thought of that are coming down the pipe.
Okay, we've only got a few more minutes left, and I have a question from Carol C. Is it known if Zoom and WhatsApp are truly safe, i.e., private to use?
So these are private organizations. They do claim that there's end-to-end encryption. There's no evidence to say it is not safe.
Mhm.
However, I always sometimes it's not the app. It might be something else, like for example, a compromised device. And if you're using a compromised device, if there's malware on it, information might still be able to get into the hands of hackers and fraudsters. So as apps, I think they're I don't see issue, but still, if you're going to have extra sensitive conversations, if there's an element of confidentiality, do your homework before you use any of these apps and have protocols in place. Nothing is 100% secure, period.
Okay, we've got 2 minutes left,
Yep.
but I want to squeeze in a question. You were talking about TikTok being banned off government devices. Do you think that TikTok should be banned outright?
I don't tell. So my thing is, I don't tell people whether to use the app or not. I think that's a personal decision. I think what individuals need to ask is not just about TikTok, of any social media app, which by the way, they're all collecting the same amount of data on individuals. Is you got to ask yourself is, how can I safely use the app? Who has control over over this information? And then make a personal decision. Clearly, TikTok is front and center right now, but there's other apps as well that have been collecting everything from your location to content without the right protections in place. You gotta know before you hit I agree. What are you actually agreeing to? Are you okay with it? Who has control? And then make an informed decision on whether to use any app.
Ritesh, I wish we could had more time, but I'm going to bother you. I'm going to ask for another interview on camera right now for the thread, and maybe we can continue talking about a bit more, because we didn't get to a lot of information. And I think you could really help me. I mean, us. You could help all of us navigate the social media world. But thank you so much, and thank you for your patience, and thanks everybody for tuning in. Be careful out there. Thanks again, Ritesh.
Thank you.